The southern kingdom of Judah was standing on the brink of destruction. The northern kingdom of Israel had already fallen to Assyria over a century earlier. Now Judah faced its reckoning. Politically, Babylon had become the superpower of the region, having defeated Assyria and now threatening every nation that stood in its path. Economically, Judah was burdened by tribute demands, and its people were exhausted, crushed under the weight of fear, political instability, and moral decay. Spiritually, the nation had become disconnected from God. Even after moments of reform, idolatry and injustice returned. The prophets warned them, but their voices were drowned out by pride, corruption, and the hope that military alliances would save them. In Jewish tradition, ancient Jerusalem wasn't just a city, it was the heart of God's covenant people. The temple stood as the dwelling place of God, the place where heaven met earth. For Jerusalem to fall and for the temple to burn was unthinkable. But the people had broken the covenant. The warnings of Moses in Deuteronomy 28 that unfaithfulness would bring national consequences were now coming to pass. This wasn't just a historical tragedy, it was a moment of divine judgment. Verse 18 tells us Zedekiah was 21 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 11 years. He was young, inexperienced, and installed by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, as a puppet ruler. But instead of remaining loyal to Babylon or humbly seeking God, he rebelled. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, just as Jehoiakim had done. This is a heartbreaking pattern throughout 1st and 2nd Kings. Time and again, leaders failed morally and spiritually. They led with arrogance instead of repentance. Zedekiah was no different, more concerned with politics than with righteousness. He ignored Jeremiah's counsel and chose rebellion over submission. Now, look closely at verse 20, our key text. It was because of the Lord's anger that all this happened, and in the end, he thrust them from his presence. This is not anger in the way we think of human rage. God's anger is his justice responding to long-standing covenant betrayal. It is the sorrowful but necessary judgment of a holy God. This leads us to 2 Kings 25, 1-9, the culmination of everything. Babylon lays siege to Jerusalem. The siege lasted almost 2 years. The people were starving. Food ran out. Fear, cannibalism, and death overtook the city. What had been God's dwelling place became a prison. The wall was broken through. King Zedekiah fled, abandoning his people. This speaks volumes about failed leadership. In times of crisis, true leaders stand firm. He was captured, his sons were killed before his eyes, and then his eyes were gouged out. It was the last thing he would ever see. A cruel but symbolic punishment. Verses 8-9 bring the final blow. Nebuzaradan, the Babylonian commander, arrived and burns the temple of the Lord, the royal palace, and every important building in Jerusalem. This act was not just physical destruction, it was a tearing down of identity. The temple represented the covenant, worship, and God's nearness. The fire symbolized that the people had been cast out, exiled from God's presence. But here's where we shift, because even in judgment, there is mercy. Even in exile, God was not done with his people. The prophets had said that after the exile, there would be restoration, that God would gather his people again, cleanse them, and give them a new heart. First, this passage reminds us of the consequences of collective disobedience. When a society embraces injustice, idolatry, and pride and refuses to heed God's voice, there is eventually a breaking point. We see this today, not in sieges or burning temples, but in the slow moral decay of nations, families, and institutions. Sin has social consequences. Second, we see that
The
leadership
world bears
matters.
witness to a war.
Zedekiah ignored God's prophets. He trusted in human alliances over divine wisdom. In our lives, in families, churches, and communities, leadership must be rooted in humility, accountability, and righteousness. Otherwise, people suffer. And finally, there is hope beyond judgment. Psalm 40, verse 2 says, He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire. He set my feet on a rock. Yes, the people fell into the pit of exile, but God would later raise up Ezra, Nehemiah, and eventually Jesus Christ to rebuild, to redeem, and to restore. Maybe today you feel like Jerusalem, surrounded, broken, or burned down. But let this passage remind you God's discipline is not rejection, it is a call back to Him. And just as He restored Israel, He can restore you. That's the lesson for this week. Have a great week.